furniture homewares made from the 1940s onwards. And a study by academics at Huddersfield University looked at the buying habits of 28 vintage enthusiasts over 2 years. And it's found that the stories around items were a big part of their appeal to buyers, and also the craft that went into the making of them. Dr. Omar Abdul Rahman led that study. Estelle Bilson is a vintage collector and dealer. She's here with me in the studio in Salford. She runs the 70s House, Manchester. It's an online shop. Estelle, if I can start with you then. You brought this astonishing vintage light in to show us, and I've tweeted a picture of it. Would you describe it for our listeners?
Well, it's pure kitsch. It is about a foot long. It is a slipware peacock, and it has a lustre, like a pearlised glaze on it, with gold accents. And along its back, where its feathers would be, are multicoloured miniature bulbs. So when it lights up from inside, it glows a rainbow.
Do you recognise the finding from this academic study then, that for people like you, the story that you might be able to attach to that lamp is as important to you as the thing itself?
I think there's two different stories, Winifred. You've got a surmise story where, you can actually make up, a story surrounding the item. And then you have provenance, where you actually piece together a jigsaw of exact information about a piece.
But this one, what do you know about it? What is its story?
Well, it comes from America, which makes it quite unusual in the fact that I found it in a car boot sale in a box in Bolton. Quite by accident. It was under the table. And it's a television lamp. So it would have sat on top of a big, deep television. And obviously now, there's going to be a vast amount of listeners that, only really remember thin televisions, flat screens. But obviously when they had the deeper televisions, this would have sat on top of it as kind of an ornament and a light, which kind of is an anachronism in itself, because it can no longer function how it was intended to be on top of a television. How did it get from America? This is made out there. You don't find them in the UK. How did it make its way across the Atlantic and end up in a box under a table at a house clearance in car boot in Bolton?
Dr. Abdul Rahman, in your study, you say that people who buy vintage see themselves as curators of interesting objects. So what is the difference then between something's provenance, as Estelle put it, what you really, really know about it, and we talk about that with antiques, don't we, and the story that you might just attach to something like this but never really know the accurate story?
Yeah, thank you. So, as you mentioned, with antiques, it's valued because of their provenance. So the actual facts of a particular item, whereas vintage tends to be more subjective, and because it's pre-owned items with an association to a previous era. So that's the main difference about that. Where in terms of vintage, it tends to be valued more because of the meanings and stories assigned to them, and because of that, it might make people more interested in buying them, but also perhaps in or preserving them as well.
Omar, tell us some of the stories then that these 28 people told you were attached to the things that they love.
Yeah. So, for example, one participant was talking about old glass pharmacy bottles she bought from a couple in Old Trafford, who in turn bought from a trader. And she was wondering as well, like Estelle, how it came, its journey before that. And she likes to imagine it being on a pharmacy with a man with a Victorian mustache behind the counter. Then it became, eventually it went to someone's home, maybe in the kitchen. But the interesting thing is she's fully aware this might not necessarily be true, or even it might not be Victorian really. But it's fun to speculate and create a story around that. But in that case, the name of the manufacturing company is on the bottle. So you can trace a little bit. And when I was talking to her, she mentioned that, her next step is actually to research the company and try to figure out how old the bottles actually are. Another participant also had an Indo-Persian shield at his home. And he was also wondering about his journey, how it came, what's happened to it. But he mentioned that he likes to imagine it having a little bit of dramatic life. Maybe it has been in a battle or something. But he's fully aware that it might be ornamental item really, but he likes to imagine it that way. So again, it's the fun of speculation and also sharing those details with other people as well.
Estelle, how did you come to be a vintage collector and a vintage dealer? And was this element of storytelling and sharing a story ever part of it for you from the start?
Yeah, I mean, I was born into it, really. My father was a cabinet maker and antiques dealer. So, I started going to auctions at age 4 and, being very careful to sit on my hands not to bid on anything. But yeah, so, I grew up in a house full of antiques, very much Georgian and Victorian furniture rather than what I collect today. And, it was conversations of where has this come from, this dining table, who's had a meal around it. How many Christmas dinners, for example, or Sunday lunches has, been around this table, discussing political, world events. So especially when you've got something 200 or 300 years old, my father and I talked about these things. I think Omar's right. I think most people who buy vintage buy it for nostalgia. Very much a sentimental reason, where you remember an aunt or a grandparent having something in the house, and you project those feelings of nostalgia onto a piece. It means something to you because you remember it in maybe a relative's house.
Just going back to your peacock that used to sit on top of the telly and was made in America. Did you say you bought it in a car boot sale in Oldham?
Bolton,
okay. So what is your fantasy then around it? What do you imagine? I'm straight away thinking maybe a merchant seaman brought it back as a gift for somebody. I don't know.
I mean, one of the things that is about, I come from East Anglia, so there was a lot of air bases around there. And, you would find American pieces, locally because people had bought them in because they sat up home. They moved with the Air Force and set them up. I don't think there's any Air Force's American air bases around here. I'm not sure.
No.
I have to check that out.
Well, there would have been, wouldn't there? Burton would, but that's wartime.
Yeah, but I guess, it's like maybe they bought it on holiday. Did they go to Florida or something and see it in a shop and think, I must have this? And you will never, ever know. You'll never be sure. And like you say, it's that supposition.
Omar, part of it too is that, sorry, you wanted to say something. I was going to say to you, part of it too is admiring the craftsmanship that's perhaps gone now.
Yes, absolutely. So that's part of, curatorial consumption in that sense, in that because it's no longer common, maybe the craftsmanship or the style or the fact, there is something, as Estelle mentioned, there is something nostalgia or sentimental about that. And that's why you want to preserve it and to buy it to begin with, perhaps. Dr.
Omar Abdul Rahman and Estelle Bilson, thank you both very much indeed. Just before you go, Estelle, how much is it then? If I wanted it, or is it not for sale?
It's not for sale. I mean, everything's for sale at the right price. Okay. I mean, I can tell you how much I paid for it, but
how much do you pay for it?
I paid £2.
Okay, perhaps we'll talk about it later. Yes. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Fuel prices fell by 9 pence per litre